Specific Lab. Today I'm going to show you how to build this awesome mobile cart for our mini lathe that has a bunch of storage, can easily be moved around. Let's begin. Now my wife is really enjoying playing on the lathe. She's made bowls and pins and a few other things. The only thing is that currently it rests on one of my workbenches, which is kind of in the way whenever I want to make a big project. So this awesome cart is going to be able to allow us to get this off my workbench and move it around wherever we want. Now for this project I'm going to be using primarily 3/4 inch plywood. I have a bunch of scraps left over from a few different other projects that are different colors and different textures, because one of them's birch, one of them's pine. But I'm not too worried about looks because this is a shop project. I want it to be nice and sturdy, but if it's slightly different colored, it's a shop project. I first started by drawing this out on SketchUp, but I did have to modify a few things in the process of building. I started by putting together the top section with 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood. One of these pieces was left over from the desk I built for my son a few weeks back, and it was an awesome project itself. Now after trimming both pieces to desired size, I glued them together and placed a couple of heavy objects on top until they had some time to dry. I then moved on to cutting out the legs, which have a slight angle in the front to provide a more sturdy footprint and a less likely chance of the cart falling over. And to give the legs more strength at the foot, I cut down a 2x4. I just used one of the previous cutoffs to measure out the angle so it would be flush with the legs. To hold the 2x4s in place, I just clamped them down and added a few screws from the outside of the legs. At this point, I decided to cut down the rest of the large pieces to hopefully speed up the process. Using a circular saw, some clamps, and a straight edge made quick work of this. After the top had enough time to dry, I decided to color the second half with the same mahogany stain. This will make it look a little more uniform and will definitely have a contrasting color to the rest of the cart. And while the top was again drying, I moved back to working on the legs, where I glued together 2 more 2x4s for a cross brace. I then drilled some pocket holes at each side on the front and back. And then I connected the legs together at the center of each. Next, moving to the top of each leg, I drilled 3 pocket screws on the inside of each. I then grabbed the top section, which was still a little damp, and placed it on the top of the legs. But I did remember to use gloves this time to keep the stain off my hands. I then added the screws to secure it in place. It was now time to flip the cart upside down, so I first laid out a layer of plastic to prevent the top from getting discolored or scratched. By flipping it over allowed me to use gravity to help hold each of the pieces in place as it was built. I then added the backing and a separator for the drawer section using some pocket screws in a few locations. And as you might have noticed, I am not using glue in any of these sections, just in case I decide to modify or upgrade in the future. In the process of me building this cart, I asked my wife if she would turn 3 knobs on the lathe, and she gladly accepted. She turned down a piece of poplar into 3 awesome knobs. The matching pair may not be exactly perfect, but for her first time at turning knobs, I thought they were wonderful. I then cut down a few strips of plywood for the drawers and test fitted them in place. And for the bottom, I decided to use some 1/4 inch plywood. I then drilled some pocket holes and used a corner clamp to make sure all of the boards were straight. Alright, I get this is not the exact proper way to build a drawer, but it does fit and it should work. Plus this is just a shop project, so I'm not worried about this looking super fancy. We'll see how it goes. I then added a layer of glue around the base of the drawer and secured the bottom in place using my brad nailer. I then repeated this process for the second drawer. And it was now time to add those beautiful knobs, which I pre-drilled each one to prevent cracking. And I also pre-drilled a hole in the center of the drawer face. I then screwed each of the knobs in place and they worked great. Now that we got the drawers so that they'll slide in and out, they fit in well, we need to add a stopper so you don't accidentally pull the drawer all the way out. So to keep this really simple, I'm just going to take a nail and I'm going to attach it to the bottom of the top here. Now I'm going to put this a little over 3/4 of an inch of the way in so that the front of the drawer can still close flush, and that way you can easily keep from pulling the drawer out. If for some reason this drawer does have to come out, say it gets jammed or some other reason that we just need to take the whole thing out, just easily pry the nail out and you can get it out. And for the base of the drawers, I decided to again use pocket screws to hold it in place. But before I attached the base, I placed a few popsicle sticks between itself and the drawers to allow space for sliding. I then secured it in place with several screws. I next pre-drilled and positioned the back of the cabinet and added several screws for strength. This backing will also give strength and rigidity to the whole structure, so I had to make sure it fit well. I then measured the height of the back panel and marked the same height at the front of the cart to make sure the base of the cabinet would be level. And using several screws, I secured the base in place. Now for me to attach the cabinet door, I'm going to have to flip this whole setup over. But before I do that, I want to add some casters to the bottom. But the current configuration, I have a feeling if this thing gets moved around a lot and gets abused a little bit, that these could possibly strip out. So I'm going to take an additional 2x4, I cut it to the length, and I'm going to attach it to this 2x4 that is in here with some long screws, and then I'm going to add some additional casters to the bottom, and that should give it plenty of strength for any kind of abuse that it will be having. I then added the additional boards and the casters to the bottom of the cart. After I flipped the cart over, I added a third knob to the front of the cabinet door and used some basic hinges to secure it in place. And to keep the door shut, I added a simple magnet latch at the top. And I was finally able to get this mini lathe off my workbench and onto its own cart. Now overall, we're really excited how this turned out. We got the big cabinet for big stuff and a couple small drawers that we can put like the gouges and anything else small we need in there. The heavy duty top should not have to worry about warping at all. And overall, the heavy duty casters should be able to let us move it around wherever, whenever. And I believe this is going to be a great addition to our shop, and I hope you have the chance to build one too. Now if you enjoyed this project, make sure you click the like button. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. I also have some other videos right over here that go along with this project, so make sure you check those out. Otherwise, have fun building.